Okay, Math 1, Unit 2B, Section 1, 2 parallel and 1 transversal. So we remember that parallel means, well, if we're talking about parallel lines, they never touch, right? 2 parallel lines never touch. Sometimes they're listed, sometimes that's the symbol, or I think it might be slanted the other direction. Nope, it was the previous one. Sometimes you use that word, that symbol for parallel. Transversal. In what we're going to be dealing with, a transversal is going to be a line that goes through 2 parallel lines. So what do I say there? Line that intersects 2 parallel lines. You know what? That parallel symbol does go forward. There, that's how it would be. All right, so transversal is a line that intersects 2 parallel lines. So let's draw a little thing here. Here's 2 parallel lines. You know, we have our arrows in the end because they are lines, not segments. And then we're going to put another little set of arrows on there to signify that they are parallel. This guy here is going to be our transversal. All right, so here let's say this is A, B, and C. A and B are parallel, and then C is the transversal. All right. These terms might be new, they might be old. I'm not really sure. We have complementary and supplementary. All right. These are always talking about angles. So complementary angles add up to 90 degrees, right? So complementary angles are 2 angles that add up to 90 degrees, right? So 2 45-degree angles would be complementary. Supplementary angles add up to 180 degrees. You know what? I'm just going to take out that little symbol there. Supplementary angles add up to 180 degrees. So like an 80-degree angle and a 100-degree angle, they add up to 180 degrees. You'd say they are supplementary. All right, so let's look at our page here. There's some fancy things that we can say here about our diagram here of our 2 parallel lines and our 1 transversal. We have vertical angles, and vertical angles might be a new thing for you. Normally I call vertical angles opposite angles, or I kind of think about them as opposite angles. Opposite angles would be 2 that are opposite of each other, right? Opposite angles or vertical angles are congruent. So let's write that over here. Vertical angles are congruent. Vertical angles are congruent. Vertical angles are opposite angles. Right? If we were to draw that on a paper, just 2 little lines intersecting, then this and this would be vertical angles. You could also say this guy and this guy are vertical angles, right? And I don't know if I've gone over this yet, but this is how we mark angles as being congruent. That little swoop there, those 2 swoops there, that means the 2 angles are congruent, okay? And then if we have a different angle, then we do a double swoop, meaning the double swoops are different than the single swoops, and the double swoops are congruent, right? So we have 2 sets of congruent angles there. All right, so here we could say that we have vertical angles there, we could say that we have them there, or we could say them that about the other intersection. Now we want to talk about compare this intersection to this intersection. In your head, you could probably move it down and translate it like what we did in the last section or the last unit and kind of shift it down and they would land on top of each other. Hopefully you're able to see that. I could take this top dot and put it down on the bottom dot and the lines would line up perfectly, right? Remember that they're parallel and that kind of helps. So from that, we could say, well, here, let me just label them. We'll say 1, we do a different color. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, right? We have 8 total angles there, right? So we've already said that angle 1 is congruent to angle 4. We could also say, if we were to kind of shift it down, we could see that 1 would land on top of 5. 4 would land on top of 8. So we could say 1 is congruent to 4, which is also congruent to 5, angle 5, which is also congruent to angle 8. Right? So hopefully you're able to see that we can kind of shift them down and they all end up being congruent to each other. Right? Initially, we say that 1 and 4 are congruent because of vertical angles. And then from there, we can say 5 and 8. All right. Now let's also say that about the other sections, or the other chunk of angles here. We have 2 and 3 are congruent, which also means that 6 and 7 are congruent. And they're congruent to each other because they can move down there. So I'll write that in. I have angle 2 is congruent to angle 3, which is congruent to angle 6, which is congruent to angle 7, right? I just listed all of them. So really, we should be able to look at this and say, well, really, we only have 2 unique angle measures here. Another word that we want to have here is, where do I want to write this? I'll write it down here. We have adjacent angles. Right? Adjacent angles are what they sound like. Adjacent means next to. So angles next to each other. Right? Adjacent angles are 2 angles that are next to each other, right? So we could look up here and we'd say, well, angle 1 right here is adjacent to angle 2, right? They're next to each other. That would be a good thing to know how to talk about. Now, let's also talk about complementary and supplementary angles. Okay, we're going to focus on supplementary angles here. So supplementary means they add up to 180 degrees. Now you might know that a straight line is 180 degrees. So here, if I draw a line down here, then here's my point. This angle is a 180 degree angle. Okay? So, let me erase this for a second. If I have an angle come out of here, we'll call this like A and B, angle A and angle B. You could say that angle A and angle B are supplementary. Okay, they add up to 180. So we're going to use that idea a lot down below. If we look at our diagram that I have of the 2 parallel lines and the 1 transversal, and we think about the supplementary, we could kind of move that on and say, well, if we look at the top, here's a line, here's the line that comes out of it, so angle 1 and angle 2 are supplementary, right? So from there we could say, well, if I know angle 1, I could find all 8 angles from that, right? So I know there's a lot of stuff there. I know there's a lot of different words and a lot of different symbols. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. If it doesn't, email me. But let's look at the homework and see how well we can do. So let's look at number 2. we have this angle up here and this angle down here. Just like before, we're going to take this dot or this intersection and kind of shift it down to that intersection. And we should be able to see that they are congruent. So I could do like a big swoop through that. There's a big swoop. There's a big swoop. That means that they're congruent, which means that I could list them as equal. So 114 equals 122 plus x. So I can subtract there. I'll subtract 122 to the other side. And I get, what's that going to be? That's going to be a negative number, isn't it? -8. So -8 is x. Now, there's a special word that we sometimes use whenever we take an angle and move it down to the other one. We could call it corresponding. Corresponding angles are like angles in number 2, where you can kind of shift it down. They correspond to each other. Let's look at number 3 now. Just like in the last one, it's just a little bit different. We have this angle down here, and then this corresponding angle down there. So from there we can say, well, they're equal. So I'm going to say 32x equals 3x minus 4. From there I can subtract my 33 and get it to the other side. So I'll have -x equals -4. So x equals 4. Let me make sure my audio is still working correctly. All right, sorry if it messed up there. So x equals 4. All right, let's move on and look at number 4 here. This is where it starts to get a little bit trickier. So I have this angle here. Its corresponding angle is this angle down here. So I could say, well, this is 5 plus 15x, right? Because they're equal, they're congruent. From that, I can say, well, this angle and this angle are vertical angles, right? They're opposite angles. And opposite angles are equal. So I'm going to say, well, 16x minus 2 equals 5 plus 15x. I'll subtract my x's over and I get 1x minus 2 is 5. I add my 2 over and x is 7. All right, number 5. Number 5 is a lot like number 4. Here's my angle. I can translate it down, or I can use the corresponding angle to say, well, this is also -2 plus 11x. And then I can talk about vertical angles and say, well, these two guys are equal. So 108 equals -2 plus 11x. I add my 2 over and I get, well, 111 is 11x. Is that right? 8, 9, 10. No, 110. 110 is 11x. So I divide by 11 and I get 10 equals x. Moving on, number 6. All right, so we've got this 8x, and then we have 100. Well, let's take the 100 and let's move it up to its other corresponding angle. So this, here's 100. Here's also going to be 100. And of course, we're talking about degrees here. Now we're going to have to use supplementary angles. So if I start off looking at this side here, that's like a straight angle, that's a line. And then I have my line that comes out of it. I know that those two have to add up to 180. So I could say, well, 8x plus 100 is 180. right? That's because of supplementary angles. So I'll subtract 100 and I get, well, 8x is 80. Dividing by 8, I get x is 10. That problem's a little bit different than all of them that we've done before. Number 7. If we look at our 12x plus 4 up here, the other angle is a corresponding angle, right? And corresponding angles are equal. So 12x plus 4 is equal to negative 4 plus 13x. I'm going to move my x's to the right side, so I'm going to subtract 12x from both sides. And I'm going to move my constants to the left, so I'm going to add 4 to both sides. Right, so from that I can cancel my 12s, I can cancel my 4s, and I'm getting 8 equals x. All right, moving on to number, oh, actually that's it. All right, cool. So that's how we do these. I think some of the more difficult ones will be like number 6, wherever you have to add them up and set them equal to 180. There will be some like that on the homework. A lot of them are just going to be corresponding angles, and really you either say, well, they're equal to each other, or you say, well, they add up to 180. Those are the only two options that we have. The decision that we have to make is which one's it going to be. Are they going to be equal, or are they going to add up to 180? All right, that's all.